gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Very, very excited about this week's program. Our guest is, to call him a giant is an understatement, folks. We used to say when we had Stan Friedman on, they would have to build the wing for him at the museum. Loren has the museum, so it even goes beyond that. He is a legend, an icon for me personally, a mentor and a friend. I looked it up here almost 19 years ago. January 23rd, 2006 was the first time I ever interviewed Loren Coleman. So nearly 19 years ago, I was just a punk 27-year-old kid trying to start out in this field. And he's been picking me up the whole way, man, for the last almost 20 years. So I have huge respect for him. I love him. And I've been pestering him to get on the Revival here since we relaunched the program last year. And finally to roll out 2025, here he is. Need I say more, ladies and gentlemen, Loren Coleman, the legend.
Well, it's great being here, Tim. Right on time. There's the dog.
Go.
So I was trying to remember, wasn't that in Massachusetts? We were on the outside of a UFO 14 conference, and you were doing an interview of me right outside the building with the wind blowing, and this.
That was shortly thereafter. Yeah.
That was great beginning, though.
Yeah, the Watertown events. Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of adventures, you and I. We hung around in Canada. I went to the museum when you first launched it in the back of the Green Hand. I still have like the T-shirt that had the original.
You've got an original one, right?
Yeah. So I've been obviously
carefully wash that and preserve it. We're going to have you at the launch of our new museum whenever we get it finally done, renovated and everything. But it's taking a while. But we have to have you come up and wear your T-shirt and MC a little.
Absolutely,
so you can do all of that.
I'd be happy to do that. So we may have talked about this in the last, last time I had you on a couple of years ago or whatever. But so what facilitated this move to Bangor? Because the museum's really well established in Portland. So I was really surprised that you were making this move. But I can see, you have that nice building and everything. So I can kind of see what your vision is here.
Well, the vision came about because of several circumstances. So we are in Portland, and we have been in Portland since 2003. And through a progression of, we were in front. We were actually in this little room that was in the back of the Green Hand. And then they wanted to take over that room, which often happens. And we had to move around the corner to Avon Street. Then those folks who were renting Avon Street wanted to expand, and they actually were knocking the building down next door and getting rid of the parking lot we used. So we had to find another place.
Yep.
And I found the Thompson's Point, which was an old railroad engine repair area that had been, through years of being used incorrectly with dumps and different things, finally was being renovated, and we rented a space there for 10 years that turned into much longer.
Yeah.
Actually 5 years, 10 years. Anyway, we came to the end of our lease, which ends next year, at the end of next year. and it has some kind of clause in there that we have to let them know 3 years before our lease ends if we want
wow.
to rent. And we started getting very frustrated by being embedded in the midst of a brewery area.
Yeah.
Often happens. Breweries are fine, but there was a brewery next to a winery, next to another kind of place that had rave type events happen, which was it would seem like it would be great for entertainment, like having a museum in the middle of it. But they started playing porn music.
Yes, I remember you telling me this.
Yes, and that was
I saw you.
very hard on our staff because they would try to tell the people, general public, the nice kids from school vacations would drop by, and they wondered why, ramrods and different other things that I won't go into too deeply, but it was pretty graphic music.
Yeah.
And so
so that made the decision a lot easier to leave, right?
right. And actually, we would have liked to left right away, but we were put in a position of not being able to really move out quickly. We didn't have any place to go. My wife is actually from the Bangor area. She grew up here as well as living in Florida for a while. And so we moved up here, I guess it's getting to be 3 years ago. And I started looking around for property that we could change into a museum. And I ran across this streamlined modern building, which was built in 1945. And it's kind of like part of Art Deco that went into a different phase around transportation and smooth horizontal lines as opposed to vertical lines.
Yeah.
And I got a loan from the Small Business Administration and done a little other manipulation through the bank. And so we bought it. And actually, one of the first things I tried to do was get it on the National Historical Registry. And it took me 2 years to do that. And last March, it became part of the National Historical Registry, so that the plan for this building was to knock it down and make it into a car wash. So we actually saved the building. And now we're slowly getting a little grant money and a little donations here and there. And it's taking a long time because if you can't come up with $2 million right away and hire everything up front.
Yeah.
So we're doing little $10,000, $1,000, $100, putting it all together. And we may be able to get in the building at the end of 2025. So that's our long-term goal. And then we'll completely empty that building down there out and move up. It's well established. We couldn't just run away from it because it actually was our only stream of income to repair the.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But it's taken a long time, and it's taken a lot of my focus because I other than writing forwards to books and a chapter here and there, I'm not writing books right now. I'm putting this museum together, and it's just driving me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to you. I've kind of watched you from afar making this move over the last couple of years, and I'm just like, I'm pulling for you. I'm just kind of, I'm in awe of your fortitude. I wouldn't. I'll be 46 in a few weeks, and I'd be like, no, I'm not. That's too much work for me. That's crazy. So I mean, hats off to you. I'm sure it's been very stressful and everything. And
well, I'm actually 77 and a half. So
there you go.
I mean, it's actually I've had 4 strokes because of all the stress. But I'll be damned if I don't let this happen.
There you go. I like that attitude. Nice. Yeah. Well, I'll be there on opening day. I can promise you that.
Good.
So we had a show a few months back with Dustin Severs, who wrote The Abominable Snowman of California, and he and I saw you were very you praised it quite a bit. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that because I was surprised. I don't know necessarily surprised is the right word, but I was interested in knowing your opinion. And then he mentioned that you put it over as like the best book of the year when it came out. And it was just really kind of surprising in a sense because it's very skeptical. It's a very sort of puts forward the idea that these guys were kind of not on the level, if you will.
Right. Well, he does take a very skeptical approach to it. But one thing that I really appreciated about the book is that when I kind of saw that Tom Slick was being neglected, that's when I decided to write my book in 1989. And one of the things that I really demanded of the field was, hey, you've got this guy, he gave millions of dollars. Why don't people know about him? Why don't people look into what he did? And then the other people that helped him, were they all on the up and up? Yeah. And I said some of that stuff, and I was very skeptical of some of those people back then. Two of the people were known hoaxers, and they obviously were doing it to get money out of Tom Slick. I mean, Tom Slick he had a lot of passion for the field, and he really put himself out there and gave money. But then you can kind of see it from the point of view of us as investigators. Well, what would somebody do if they came across the golden goose? They'd keep coming up with mysteries.
Yeah.
And I think I am of the opinion that there were real mysteries there, that there were real footprints found, that there were real encounters, but there were some people involved in that that really kept it going way beyond what the evidence was showing.
Yeah.
And so I was glad Dustin was skeptical and put some of that out. I know a lot of people read the book right from the beginning and thought, this is pretty skeptical. But the way I read it is that I saw he did both things. He was very good historically and dug deep into the history and looked at what dots were connected and where they went, and did come up with some. It's just one of those books that will really age well.
Yeah.
I think that the more people, the splashes that the first year it's appreciated, then people will start rereading it again, and they'll start kind of going down the historical component for each of those individuals and see, well, maybe Dustin wasn't right on this one, but he certainly was right on that other one.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm about it with that book. And I think what it did was, in 1989, I wrote my first Tom Slick book, and then I did a revision with more information in 2002. And then he did this book in last year, and it seems like there's more books coming out about that time period. And so the floodgates are about ready to open for more. People don't want to forget that period. 58 to 67 was a critical Bluff Creek time, and it's good to see people re-examining it. And then, of course, there's the whole group of people that are looking at the film site, examining that, writing books about that, and even maps, and is it correctly been located, and preserving it. So it's actually sad to see what else is going on, like Michael Rugg and his Bigfoot Discovery Museum is going away. It's disappearing. So it is interesting to see the young researchers. Well, what's his name? Mark Meisel who found the cabin, the Ape Canyon cabin,
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know about that.
with he's found the nails and where it was located from 1924. So there's people doing that. In the meantime, that's why I feel our museum is so important, to try to keep it and formalize it and get money for it, because all of these other ones, they kind of come and go quickly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's yeah, you dropped a lot on me there. Yeah. I had the opportunity to actually visit the Bigfoot Discovery Museum back in September. So, and Michael was in bad shape then. So I wasn't surprised when we heard a few weeks later that he was shutting down. So yeah. But I guess Cliff Barackman is buying the stuff, so that's good. So
he's nice and close, and you can just go down the coast and pick it all up. I think that's extremely important, that museums don't put their stuff on eBay. But they other museums. So I'm glad to hear that.
Now, so when I was talking to Dustin, so this question came up, and if you ever hear the interview or whatever, I asked him the question, he couldn't answer it, and then we were both like, "Well, Loren might know this," so I had it I've had it in my notes now for like several months. So we know the Patterson-Gimlin film, right? Was prior to the Patterson-Gimlin film, were there any other claims of photos or videos, or film or whatever of Bigfoot, or was this like such a was that the seminal moment that someone finally, for the first time ever, claimed even to have photographed or filmed it? Because like you hear, obviously we know about the Patterson-Gimlin film, but it's just surprising that I don't know of any other. There's some contemporaneous, maybe 90s, 2000s, maybe a couple of good things, but like there's nothing from that era that's like, it was a Patterson-Gimlin film, there's also X, Y, and Z. It's like there really aren't any other examples of this, Bigfoot media, so to speak, photos, videos, that I know of. That's the question. So you would know. It was, I guess, put that Patterson-Gimlin film in the greater context of what was going on as far as claims and accounts.
Well, as far as I know, there were no other films. And obviously, that's a mistake that a lot of people talking about the Patterson-Gimlin film, they often say it's a video. And we know it was a film. And that was very important for, in the later years, for analyzing it, because you could blow up the film. You can't blow up video in the same way. The one thing, I think there have been one or two photographs. There's one with the individual, his identity is kind of pretty foggy, but he was from Oregon, and it was a kind of a blurry figure in the trees, and it wasn't one of these blog squatches. It was actually a pretty good photograph of a Bigfoot type creature.
Yeah.
And that's about the only one that I can think of that was contemporary with the Patterson-Gimlin film. The thing about the Patterson-Gimlin film that really makes it a great piece of evidence is that you had a historical area of native tales. You had other sightings of footprints. And of course, that was the same area that the Jerry Crew people had actually found the original, quote unquote, original footprints in 1958. We know that actually footprints had been found in 57, but they didn't give the kind of publicity they did in 58. But because of that focused area was amazing. And then, of course, Gimlin and Patterson came along, and their horses reacted. Their horses smelled it. They smelled it. They heard it. There was the whole multi-layers of evidence. And of course, they found footprints. When you think about it, that's the only case where you found footprints and photographic evidence that overlap.
Right. Yeah.
And that's remarkable because you actually have footprints that go with a body that is visible and you can describe, as opposed to somebody giving a case where they talk about what they saw and then 2 weeks later they found footprints.
Yeah.
So that all was all very good, and but it is unique that way, and I think it's the only good film. And of course, people all the time say, "Well, why didn't we have another film that's as good as that?" Because there's so many cell phones. Well, it just doesn't happen, and cell phones aren't that great.
Yeah, and most sightings here, like they're very, very fast. Like it runs across in front of the car or something.
Right.
So there was an account from a postal worker like earlier late last year that he like just passed right by it. It was like, well, how do you, and he was shaking it. He was sure it was Bigfoot. So
right, and there's a real breakdown. Even John Green talked about this. If you look at the different clusters of sightings, most of the ones that cross the roads are thin adult males, adolescents, probably kicked out of the nest, so to speak, and they're running across roads. And most of the sightings of groups where there's females, old females, young females, males, females, those tend to be off the beaten track, in which there's family groups that are seen, and they're not the youthful ones that are crossing the roads. So those are all infrequent, and we're all trying to analyze Bigfoot behavior based upon about 3 seconds of their life, which is remarkable, but it does break down that way. And also the notion that water is important. Most of the sightings are near water.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Bigfoot media, in a sense, another thing, this kind of popped in my head while we were talking about the Patterson Gimlin film, because the only other iconic, really, piece of media that I can think of is the swamp ape photo, which is like, there's something really compelling about that. And I really, I don't know, love it, I guess, I just like, it's one of my favorite sort of, I could look at it for a while. And every time, if I'm doing something and it pops up on my timeline, I'll kind of stop for like 5 or 10 minutes and just kind of gaze upon that picture and be like, what is going on there? And you were pretty integral when it kind of burst out on the scene. Do you have any thoughts? You would know how long ago that was, but I'm sure it was at least a couple decades ago. Do you have any thoughts on that whole case now after all these years? I'm really surprised I'm surprised and not surprised we never got an origin of that, but like no one ever came forward to like lay claim to the photo. I know you copyrighted it to try and suss them out of the weeds. Genius move. But let's talk about the swamp ape case.
Well, I think one of the things that clicks with people about that is it's so out of the normal. If you look at when people say Bigfoot, they get a visual image in their head of an upright creature that slumps over a little, maybe has breasts, maybe has, penis, I don't know, but it has a certain look about it. Whereas if you look at this, at the skunk ape, the Myaka ape,
yes,
it actually looks somewhat like an overbearing orangutan.
Right.
And that happened. It happened at the end of '99 into 2000, right in January of 2000. And what occurred, of course, was that this elderly woman had her grandchildren deliver a bushel basket of 8 apples to her back porch. And this creature kept coming around for like 3 nights in a row. And she got so irritated that she went out and took a little Instamatic camera and just flashed at the pomalos right near the edge of her property and got these 2 pictures that she didn't really see what she saw it, but didn't see it as good as she saw it with the total light on it. And then she took it to the police department and sent a letter to them saying, I think somebody's going to be hurt. I think this orangutan, as my husband calls it, is going to, mess somebody up. And it came to me because the animal control officer at that station was also interested in Bigfoot and knew my name, contacted me, and we investigated it together. And I got in right from the ground floor.
Yeah.
And I was able to turn the picture over because they had Xeroxes of the originals at the police station, and we were able to narrow it down to the parking lots that there used to be those photo shops in the middle of parking lots. So we were able to get the number of that one, and even found a kid working there, said, "Oh yeah, that's so-and-so old lady," but we never could get a name.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I went ahead and contacted all the newspapers in Florida, put a little ad in every one saying that, we're looking for the owner of this. We've copyrighted this photograph. Come and get me. Come and get me. Come and sue me or whatever, and I wanted to really beat the woods, beat the bushes and get the person up. But nobody ever came up.
Yeah.
And, it was one of those things. But see, what I noticed in the evolution of that picture is because it was so abnormal, you had places like all of these reality TV documentary shows. They would love this picture because they love visuals.
Yeah.
So they would show it and then they would debunk it because it was easy to tear apart. Because it wasn't a Bigfoot-like image, and it didn't have a story to it that they could put their hooks into. And so, everybody from finding Bigfoot to, unknown, paranormal, unknown, and they all would say it's a hoax. And even some of the researchers would talk about, well, this had to be a hoax. So that's why the picture interest in it has gone down, because everybody just looks at it and they say, oh, yeah, I know about this picture. This is the one that was a hoax. But it wasn't. Nobody ever proved that. It's kind of like some of the ones I've investigated where I allow myself to say, I don't know. We don't know about this. And we have to keep an open mind.
Yeah. Well, to me, do you think, and I don't know this, I think obviously we don't know this, but like, to me, when I see that, I think like that it's like akin to like the British big cat. Like it's an orangutan that somehow got out of its habitat, whatever, enclosure. And someone down in Florida had an orangutan and it got out and they didn't report it because they were like, I lost an orangutan. I mean, part of me just wonders if it's just an out of place orangutan rather than sort of a relative of Bigfoot per se.
Oh, well, I've always classified the skunk apes of Florida as anthropoid apes related to orangutans. Yeah. The orangutan-like unknown primates really start showing up in the 1940s. But there's older cases that go back, and I think that they could have been orangutan-like apes that were brought over on slave ships. Yeah. Because the ship captains actually took aboard pets and brought them to Florida. And I think that they do populate Florida.
Yeah.
Similar to the big black cats that are supposedly in Australia, that may be American black cats or whatever. That there seems to be a real connection to reality here, and that they just haven't been caught. But some of the reports from around Florida look like chimps, look like orangs. They don't look like Bigfoot. And so it's
Right.
in the 1970s that these reports started changing over. The people said they saw Bigfoot or that they found Bigfoot prints. And the prints seemed to amazingly look exactly like the ones in California. They were copies, they were fakes, because people needed to prove that they'd actually seen something. And so there's that going on. The real ape-like creatures that were seen in the 40s and before were something else. And they had the toes that actually went out to the side,
Right.
like a thumb of a hand, that are much more ape-like.
No, that reminds me. One of the things that came up in the conversation with Dustin was how the Patterson-Gimlin film kind of changed the mental picture, if you will, that many people had of Bigfoot. Like originally, it was kind of like a wild man, like a hairy wild man, and then when the Patterson-Gimlin film came about, then it kind of transformed into what we know of as Bigfoot today, which is sort of like a bipedal ape, creature. Does that kind of ring a bell? Do you remember that sort of transition of thinking as far as what this thing was?
Well, yeah, I've written quite a bit about the changing face of Bigfoot, but I think Dustin is to be forgiven for leaving out a whole section here.
Yeah, I may be.
No, no, I
Forgiveness
think
to Dustin. I'm kind of paraphrasing and pulling from a thought. I may have completely botched the exchange that he and I had, but that's kind of you get the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
You get the
no,
germ. What
in
I'm saying.
British Columbia, in the 1920s and 1930s, the First Nations people is what they call the Native Americans in Canada.
Yeah.
They actually felt that the Sasquatch were a whole tribe of people that existed concurrent with them, and that they would talk about Sasquatch as having different rituals and different communications with them, which they would trade and leave things for trade for them. And some of the Bigfoot days or the Sasquatch days back then were really to honor this tribal group of people that lived alongside them. And then it happened in the 1950s, whenever Bigfoot became the word to use because of what America does to things. There started to be Bigfoot type creatures that looked more like the Patterson-Gimlin film. What we know in the late 70s and late 60s is several sightings from British Columbia, like the William Rowe sighting, shows an upright creature with breasts and bipedalness and everything that looks exactly like the Patterson-Gimlin film. And then the Patterson-Gimlin film comes along, and people think that that the Patterson and Gimlin actually were copycatting the William Rowe sighting. But that's not what happened. We just started seeing more and more contemporary creatures that was more like that. The big break that I saw happen after the Patterson-Gimlin film that really changed Bigfootery was the Harry and the Henderson film, because that was fictional, but it was comical. So everybody started having this view of Bigfoot as upright, even bigger than 6.5 feet, which is what the Patterson-Gimlin film is. And it was comical. It had a beard. It was very distinctive in a way. And so most of the sightings after that time really were copycats of that fiction film. And so you can see the progression from the Indians that were Sasquatch to the Patterson-Gimlin film to the Harry and the Henderson. And what's going on, of course, over in Florida and throughout the South are the real apes, the real anthropoids are being seen. But then there's also some people down there that keep saying those are hoaxes. The real Bigfoot are more like the Patterson-Gimlin film. And then you had the Finding Bigfoot show, which ruined the whole stew by saying there was Bigfoot in every state in the United States, which was totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
Bigfoot running around Rhode Island, that was the end.
Yeah, I do. It's hard to reconcile that.
Yeah.
The just distribution of Bigfoot. One thing I don't know if you're familiar with this. I've mentioned this before on the show. You were talking about, so we were talking about like orangutans and them bringing them over and stuff. Did you know about this? The New Zealand moose, I think it's New Zealand or Australia, where they brought them to like an island or whatever to hunt, and then they were like, yeah, but this doesn't work. But there's still moose running around, but they're kind of like apocryphal. They're like almost spectral, if you will. They're like really hard to see.
The North Island, they have a whole separate population, and since the 1920s, I think, actually. And it's a very popular. They, thank goodness they haven't, killed them out or anything, but they're quite happy down there, although there's certain people that are still hunting them.
Now, what do you think about the, this, what'd you call it? I don't know, this drive or this project to revive the thylacine?
Well, I'm very cautious about all of the cloning to bring back the mammoth, to bring back any of the striped cats, and the thylacine, because, of course, we've got lots and lots of evidence that the thylacine are still being seen on New Guinea. And New Guinea probably is the place that they
really,
are remotely in the mountains, and that there's. One of the problems with Tasmania is half of Tasmania now has been denuded. That's all the forests have been overforested, and so any expectation now that the thylacine will be found on Tasmania is probably very minor, and that the people that are really looking for the thylacine are going up to New Guinea, and that's where other animals that different primates and lizards and other things that are new to science are coming from that part of, and also the Flores man and the Flores woman, the Homo florensis, that was from Indonesia too. So there are different pockets around the world, but mostly in that part of the Pacifica where we're getting some exciting news.
Interesting. I didn't know about that, about New Guinea and the
well, that's why you have me on occasionally.
Exactly. I'm loving this conversation because I'm asked. This is deep. We're doing some deep cuts here today, but I'm really enjoying it. So why are you I don't recall the word you used, but sort of indifferent about the revival of the thylacine? I don't even the woolly mammoth. They're trying to make some kind of hybridy type thing, but they really seem like they want to make really bring this thing back. I don't know how. I don't know. I'd be interested to see if they can even pull it off. But they're putting a lot of money into it and a lot of work.
Well, the mammoths make sense because you're going to implant some of the cells and the embryo and all of that in an Indian elephant. But if you get to the thylacine, there's hope that the thylacine still exists. And I think as long as you are trying to clone it, it undermines the ability to search for the already existing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
And it gets confusing because what happens when somebody comes to university and they have a little, thylacine on a leash and say, well, was this from a clone or was this from the backwoods? Yeah. So I don't want the confusion for people. I want it to be straight science of searching for ones that are actually out in the wild.
Now, I don't remember if it was you I saw mention this or somebody else, but is there a strain of belief that there are still dodo birds out there somewhere?
Well, I've mentioned it because it makes for a great exhibit in the museum, but because they're dodo birds, of course, are pigeons. They're related to pigeons, but they're the size of a turkey, so they're huge. And there's Reform Island and some other islands around some of the places that the dodo bird went extinct in the 1600s. And they've been seen. They were probably seen 100 years after they were declared extinct. And at 100 years, it's kind of like this little game that people play on social media. 75 years was 50 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
So I think people lose track of time. It's quite a stretch to think that there's dodo birds around.
Yeah.
But, we don't even have a taxidermy body. We've got different bones, but they've never even found a taxidermy body. But the whole thing is that we've never found a Neanderthal either.
Yeah.
When you come to think of it, we found, skulls and bones and different things, and we found cave lions and cave bison and cave bear, but we haven't found a body of a Neanderthal. We don't even really know if they're covered with red hair like a lot of us think they are, and that they're related to the Irish. So we need to do some of that stuff, as opposed to wasting all this money on trying to clone. They're cloning dogs now. They're doing and cloning sheep, and so they're having quite a success. But the thylacine doesn't have a representative body to put the embryo in, because you can't put it in a kangaroo just because they're a marsupial.
Yeah.
So there's some technical problems.
Yeah, they're working on it. We'll see. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. They say in the long run it'll help the other endangered species somehow, but I'm not sure what.
Well, they always say that.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's true.
I like zoos myself, and I know that one of the justification of zoos is that they'll help conservation. But it's pretty hard on the animals too.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, is it you and I kind of exchange messages every now and again because, with my work for Coast to Coast, I'm always covering these instances where the further folklorification of Bigfoot, where it's become like a mascot and adopted by all these towns and all this stuff. Is it gratifying? Do you find it gratifying to see how Bigfoot, you mentioned Harry and the Hendersons. That was like a one and done. Like I remember because I was a huge Bigfoot fan as a kid. And it was like, that was the one thing. Now Bigfoot is everywhere. It is a cultural icon that it still amazes me to this day. It's why I love writing those stories for Coast to Coast. And it's like last year, two new public schools adopted. They opened up for the first time ever, and they needed a mascot, and they picked Bigfoot. It's like, and the NHL, the new NHL team in Utah is probably going to be the Yeti. It's just unbelievable from when I was a kid, even just when we talked for the first time in 2006. Bigfoot was it was kind of verboten. It was off on the side. It was peripheral to pop culture. Now it's just it's everywhere.
Well, I hate to say it, but in the woke culture, it's very dangerous to talk about having a Native American mascot or even the Fighting Irish or something like that. So what's one of the safest ways to go is to pick out a cryptid, the dragons or the Yetis or the Sasquatch or some soccer teams or socks. So that's safe. But the one thing that really I'm struck by is that you can have a group of 8-year-olds and you can say, I want you all to take out a piece of paper and draw a Yeti. Everybody will get it right. Yeah. Everybody will, because everybody nowadays has an image in their head of what a Yeti looks like or what a Bigfoot looks like.
Right.
And in the museum, we now collect these cultural icons, different dolls and action figures. But the one that's been really popular and has kind of just exploded is the crypto brewery that we have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Examples of beers and wines and ales that have these mascots from the cryptozoology world. It's just amazing. So
yeah, I donated a can to the
yes. Well, you donated a punk wuggy that had a
budgie that leapt off the balcony,
which is part of their folklore. They jump off cliffs and
Yeah.
it's smashed up, and I kept that, as an example.
But do you personally feel like, I mean, you dedicated your life to this subject, and now it's like, but Bigfoot has become a beloved cult. I mean, I know you. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass or whatever, but it's like you had a huge hand in this, dude. Like you were part of the popularization of this. Is it gratifying to look back on all this and go, wow, when I started, this was like such a minor thing. This wasn't part of the culture, and now it is part of the American fabric.
The real humble part of me is just struck by it, that I had a part in this, and I grew up loving Ivan Sanderson and Bernard Heuvelmans, and they were my heroes. And I felt like if I ever got to the stage where I could be standing on their shoulders, that would be the ultimate. And I decided, I don't know if you can tell this, but I'm driven.
Yes.
And so, I started using the word, I started using, getting a museum and really making sure I was going to go in a direction and keep this legacy alive, because I figure if I didn't, I started hearing things about people's collections ending up on eBay, and stuff like that. And I remember when I was in high school, so that would have been 1961 to 1965. I was all the time telling my friends about the Yeti stories, about the female Yeti that throws her breast over her shoulder so she can run down the hill. So by the time I was a senior, people were writing in my book, I hope you find the Yeti someday. So I got sort of branded that way, but it was important. I had passion, I had intellect, I corresponded with 400 experts all across the country and across the world, and really started gathering it so it wouldn't be lost, because I saw people sort of talking about it, but then forgetting about it. And I felt my books were the popularizer of Bigfoot. And so to see the Bumble become important as an extension of the Yeti folklore, or Bigfoot, chili or something else, it's been very gratifying, because it's a way to keep it in the culture and keep people interested. The sad part of it is that some people put blinders on themselves, or even worse, they put something in front of their not looking clearly. So, as you know, I write up a list of the 10 to 20 people that die every year and are connected to Bigfoot or cryptozoology. And most of these are important people, or they have some extension into culture. And it goes across the board. Like James Earl Jones, he appeared in UFO Incident, as Barney and Bennett Hill. But I saw that at the end of my list this year, 2 individuals out in Oregon died right before Christmas.
Yeah.
And they were searching for Sasquatch, and they died of exposure. A few years ago, there was an individual up in Idaho who put on a ghillie suit, pretended to be Bigfoot, and danced around in front of the major highway, asking somebody to take a picture of him. He was trying to hoax people on being a Bigfoot, and 2 cars hit him and killed him.
Oh, Jesus.
So, it happens. And we've got to look at not getting too expansive with our passion, that it's at least safe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Because I remember like when you first started the museum and stuff, and I kind of, I don't know. I'm sure you know about the because we're in New England, but the snow shovel Bigfoot. It's called Bigfoot, and I see it. I used to see it every time I left Charleston. I used to be like, well, I should grab that for Loren, because you never see. This was like a long time ago. I'm like, you never see Bigfoot anywhere. Now it's like, if I tried to get you every time I saw, if I bought everything I saw with Bigfoot on it to send up to you, I'd be broke, and you need an even bigger museum, because it's everywhere. It really is everywhere. It's
so
cool.
true.
I find it cool. I find it really cool that it's like, damn, man, Bigfoot's cool as hell now. This is so great.
That is so true. So true.
Now, talking about people who passed away, in my notes here, next is Dogman. I wanted to talk a little bit about Dogman because it's the late, great Linda Godfrey. If you ever do a posthumous Golden Yeti, if anyone ever deserved one, Linda Godfrey, talk about just an incredible impact on the field to put this into the zeitgeist of cryptozoology. But that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, talking to you, where it's like, even Linda was like flummoxed by how, I remember, because I saw her at the International Cryptozoology Conference.
Right.
And I remember seeing her there and her presentation. She was flummoxed by the incongruous nature of the Dogman's legs and how it shouldn't work.
Right.
Which, and so I guess what's your take on all that? Because you're super into you know your animals, so
well,
I figure you might be as flummoxed as the rest of us.
Well, certainly she was very humbled by that and just overtaken. It became that she would be a celebrity in the Dogman world, really.
Yeah.
And she was part of. She got pulled into some hoaxes too, and she was not too happy about that. That one guy that he would leap through a film and became. Do you remember? And
I vaguely remember that.
I have a picture of him where I'm choking him at a conference. Anyway, she did wonderful drawings of the Dogman, but I sort of had some departure from her,
right,
in which I felt a lot of people were seeing Bigfoot that were on roads, bending over, eating roadkill, and made them into Dogmen. And she could sort of understand that. Whenever there were Dogman reports that were near Indian mounds and had some kind of connection to some folklore, she could sort of understand that. But she really didn't quite understand why there were Dogmen all over. And she would run across the Bray Road creature and say that was the Dogman. A lot of us in the field, especially Bigfoot people, would get together and we'd say, why is it this woman who was a newspaper woman who is always shown on her local news reports walking her little dog around is the woman that's connected to Dogmen?
Yeah.
So there was just some skepticism of her. And I think that was unfounded because I knew she wasn't propelling it. She was as skeptical.
Yeah, she stumbled into it all,
Yeah. But it is true. If you look at some of her drawings, the legs are like a deer leg. It's like it goes the wrong way and it doesn't make sense. I'm very skeptical of the Dogman.
Yeah.
I think that if you look back into the 15th century, you can see the dog-headed men are people with robes on, and they have dog heads from religious texts, and it's almost as if that part of folklore has been there for a long, long time, but doesn't mean that it's real.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's kind of where a lot of what I was going to ask you kind of leads to, in a sense, where it's like, I'm certain you've noticed this, that in this modern era, it's cryptozoology, but it's kind of like there's a monsterification. They kind of lumping the like these. They're not really cryptids, but they lump them in like Dogman. Like Dogman seems more like monstery. Not necessarily Mothman kind of is like on the fringe of it. It's like, is that an animal, or are we talking like a monster? And you get what I'm saying? These other monsters, these sort of incongruous things, these things that aren't like Slender Man. People, it's not even real, but like people put it in with like almost like urban legends kind of get lumped in with this, in the monsterification of this. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you look at cryptozoology as a continuum, you can see what's happened is that on one end of them, you have the biological creatures, the possible sea serpents, the abominable snowmen, the Bigfoot, and then they go into some of the creatures. And what Heuvelmans talked about was whenever a monster or creature is new to a culture, it becomes fantastic. And it becomes fantastic on purpose for the culture to try to integrate it, try to accept it. And then they will take out of that what they need to make it part of is it a bear man or is it a new bear?
Yeah.
And with the Dogman, and I'm part of this too, because I actually coined the word not Dogman, Dover Demon. And the whole Dover Demon is one of those.
Dover Demon's a great example of what I was trying to say. Yes, it's like a monster. I don't know what it is, but it's like it's not akin to just like an animal.
No. And so you have this. What do we do with that? Well, we investigate them. We see if there's any physical evidence, and then we get into the paranormal or the psychic or the telepathy. Yeah. And because deep down we're Fordians, we're followers of Charles Fort, and one thing that we always should do was keep an open mind for all of the evidence, all of the and I hate to say this, but it's sort of like what's going on in the news right now. You have people with the Tesla, the truck blowing up near Las Vegas Trump Tower. Now you're finding that story is evolving into UAPs, and it's going way, way further in a direction that none of us would have believed. But should we reject that? Well, we should just take it in for a while and gather all the evidence, gather all the information, and try to figure it out.
Yeah, that whole thing is very strange.
Oh, yeah. That's another program for you.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about now, I have a distaste for this, and maybe you share it in a way. Not even the veracity per se of the phenomena, but just the new Mothman, this Michigan Mothman or whatever Mothman they want to call it. It drives me up the wall because as you, a great coiner of names, should appreciate. To me, it's like, you ever see Coming to America when the guy has the McDonald's ripoff and it's McDowell's? That's kind of how I feel about the Michigan Mothman. It's the McDowell's of cryptids, of Mothman. It's like, come on, nobody could have come up with a better name than just to rip off Mothman and add a localization to it. Like, be creative here. Can't we come up with something better than that?
Well, in my book, my second book on Mothman, where I looked at the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
I did a whole chapter on the Chicago Mothman. And if I'm not clear in there, I don't think there is a Chicago Mothman. I think that it's kites, it's red balloons, it's misidentifications. Maybe it was early drones, but it's certainly not Mothmen. It's not large birds and large winged creatures. And there is some, there's some investigators that have gone around to some of those sites that were quoted in that Chicago Mothman area, and they can't even match up where the creatures were seen would have enough room to be seen in that. So there's, the kind of deep down ground level, boots on the ground investigations that we all should do for Bigfoot and cats and giant snakes and even the Mothman in West Virginia. People have tried to do that in Michigan and Chicago, and it's failed.
Yeah.
But what you look at it is there's another level investigators that really want that promoted and want it supports their platforms to investigate. And so you began seeing that it falls apart based upon the money, the connections, the prestige, the publicity that people are trying to get out of these different events. And that's what I think we have to be careful of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like I said, it's just so, to me, the name alone is just so lazy. It's like, oh man,
it is lazy.
Yeah, as I said, it's a great coiner of names. Like you're the Dover Demon, Montauk Monster. What else? You got a few Bridgewater Triangle.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I listed 20 names once in some social media thing because I got tired of trying to remember them all.
Now you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, sort of these pockets of air of places where these creatures may still reside. One of the ones that always captivates me, and I know you mentioned it recently when you were on Coast to Coast, is the Orang Pendek. I share your belief that that feels like we're really close to getting it somehow, but it takes time.
It takes time. It took almost 25 years for people to find the giant panda and for people to acknowledge the Komodo dragon. So what's happening in Sumatra is that there are different people that are over there. They're doing tiger conservation or they're looking for orangutans, and they see these other creatures that are Orang Pendek, which are about 3 feet to 4 feet tall, and they're definitely also coming up with some footprints that are ape-like.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from some people is that they've already got hair samples. They don't have enough hair samples to have the sort of the yardstick to go with it to say, well, this is one of them.
Yeah.
There's kind of missing that. But the other thing that I think people will be confronted with is, okay, so you find one, what do you do with it? Do you kill it? Do you stuff it? Do you put it in a zoo? Do you put it on exhibit and then release it again? And that's what's going on behind the scenes is people are, in a conscious, unconscious period of time trying to figure out what is the new conservation, what is the new natural history, because we all want to do science. We all want to study these new animals, but as we know from Audubon's time, you don't kill all the passenger pigeons to prove they exist. You wipe them out. That's what happened to it. And so I often, when I was in the 1960s, and I always would be interviewed by the media, and they'd say, "Well, what's your favorite? What's your favorite cryptid?" So nobody used the word cryptid. What's your favorite monster? And I'd always say, "Well, my first love is the Yeti, so that's always going to be my first and foremost creature that I'd like to talk about and be interested in." But the problem is, by the time we discover them, they may already be extinct.
Yeah.
And that's the fear, is that I don't really have that fear about Bigfoot. But I have that about Orang Pendek. I have that about the Yeti and some of these other smaller restricted area creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Loch Ness Monster, there's probably a very small population of those that's in the loch and then crossing the land to go to other lochs. And I don't know that they'll still exist by the time we find them.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting take on the Loch Ness Monster. What do you think it is? Because I've kind of just fallen into the very skeptical large eel category, but it doesn't necessarily sound like that's what you're suggesting.
No, I think it's a type of seal, a type of long neck seal that can breathe air, that can transport itself across land, that is oftentimes seen like a slug, called a slug, or a camel. So you have to take these names that Scottish people would use or tourists would use, and then try to figure out how it might fit with what we think it might be. So that's what the eel thing is that's fiction writers. That's
really
yes. What's his name? The Loch, the guy that wrote The Loch and all of that.
Oh, I think Steve Alton.
Yeah, Steve Alton. I actually worked with him on his first book, and if you'll notice, the blurb on the cover is mine on The Loch. And I didn't like his theory of the eel, but I wasn't asked for my opinion. So.
Well, you're giving it now, so we're all set.
It's a good book.
Right.
He's a good fiction writer, but the science wasn't there.
Well, you're giving me pause on the Loch Ness Monster because, like I said, I kind of had just classed it as that. But now, are there long neck seals, or is this something that would be sort of wholly new?
Oh well, paleontologists have identified ones in the fossil record that are like seals with long necks, and you actually in the book The Great Sea Serpent, which is from 1896, his whole theory was that this was a long-necked seal that was the sea serpents that are to be discovered yet. And I think there's an overlap there between some of the bigger lakes and some of the northern Atlantic oceans.
Interesting. All right. Interesting. Now, we mentioned the Bigfoot Discovery Museum earlier, Michael. I guess I just wanted to know have you ever been out? Had you ever been out to the museum?
Well, I visited him. I didn't get to that museum, but I also noted when I was writing that up that the other great loss was Bigfoot Books in Willow Creek, and I'd been to that a couple of times, and that burned down. That totally burned down and is not coming back. So that was another great loss to the Bigfoot field.
Yeah. Well, that's a bummer. Yeah. I remember reading that in your wrap up. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've kind of made starting to make like a mental list in a sense, because I'm trying to go to all of the different Bigfoot museums. There are quite a few of them now. Obviously, yours is the preeminent International Cryptozoology Museum, but there's a nice one down in Georgia that I went to. I did the Bigfoot Discovery Museum, and I'm hoping to check out the one in Nebraska here in 2025. So
there's one in Colorado.
Yeah, there's one in Colorado. I think there's one in the Pacific Northwest. That's the Barackman one.
Yeah.
And I bet there's one down in Florida. There's one in Florida.
All right.
Yeah. So
there's the
I need to make a list.
Snallygaster Museum in Maryland.
That's me. Yeah, Maryland. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And
It's
then
pretty crazy.
North Carolina has one that calls itself Paranormal / Cryptozoology.
Yeah,
We're the
and the
only,
West Virginia. I went to the one in West Virginia. It's very
oh,
nice.
right down the street from the Mothman Museum, I guess.
Genius. Walking distance, a block. It's like the smartest movie ever made, lady. This is the perfect place. We drove out there. We did an hour or two in the one museum, then just walked down to the other one. It was really cool.
And have you been to Sutton, West Virginia too? Flatwoods.
Sutton?
Yes.
Yeah.
Flatwoods Museum.
Yeah, Flatwoods Museum is great.
Yeah, when I went there, the museum did not exist yet. You had to go to the gas station and buy one of the candle holders that had the Flatwoods monster. That was all it was.
Yeah, I got the candle. Yeah, I got one. I don't want to grab it right now. I got it on my desk here. Yeah. Great museum. You appreciate this. So we went there, and there's a sign. I have a picture of it. They have like a little couch in the back and a table. And on the table is a sign that says, please no seances, something like that. Seances are not allowed. And I thought it was like a joke, like just kind of a cheeky thing. So I asked the young woman at the desk, whatever, the clerk, I'm like, what's with the seance sign? And she said a few years ago, a bunch of some religious group came into the Flatwoods Monster Museum and tried to exorcise it of whatever of the evil of the whatever the Flatwoods Monster was, and like lit something on fire. And they had to call the cops and the fire department and everything. So that's why they have a no seances sign. It's crazy.
The first time I went to visit Point Pleasant, I think it was before the movie actually came out, and then I traveled back there for different filmings and stuff, and I walked into one shop, and the guy said, "Hi, Loren Coleman." And I said, "I've never met you before." He said, "Oh, you're on the film." And so I looked up above me, and I was on a documentary section of the Mothman film. I was playing that right at the same time. It was kind of a shocker to me.
Well, that reminds me of, I'm sure you saw the pictures. I went to the Stan exhibit up in Canada, the Stan Friedman Museum exhibit. Mm-hmm. It was tremendous. And I was thinking about that today, because as you come around the corner, you hear Stan. It was like, he used to be so ubiquitous. I mean, you would hear him all the time, because it was like, it was got me like misty eyed just because you just turn the corner and you're like, wait, is that Stan? Because they play the Unsolved Mysteries that he was on. And you turn the corner and there's Stan. It's like, wow. And then you go in and it's like, it's just amazing. It's really a really crazy thing. And remarkably, what of interest that is to cryptozoology is at that museum, weirdly enough, is the Coleman frog.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to get them to give it to me. No, actually, I've talked to them about a replica, because they're very cautious about having anybody handle it because they don't want any DNA taken from it.
Right.
I didn't know if you knew that, because it is an old advertising model.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, they're very, yeah. Well, they weren't necessarily trying to sell me on that it was real, but they certainly love it. I think that's probably why, they'll never give it to, they'll never give that thing up. I think that was the big draw until they put it in the Stan exhibit. So, but it was remarkable to me. It's like these two very off the wall things in the same little Canadian museum. So
at Stan's museum, do they have some of his ties?
They got a jacket, they have a tie, they have all kinds of paperwork, they have all kinds of photos. It's immersive. It really is. And all kinds of little cool things, like his S. Friedman, like his little name placard that was on his desk when he was working as an astrophysicist and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. Now to pivot a little bit here off of cryptozoology, because you're also, you're well known for the copycat effect and that. And I guess when we first talked 19 years ago, we actually did like a split interview with like half cryptozoology and half copycat effect. We're not going to split this one because we're heading towards the end, but it does strike me as remarkable. I was thinking about that today, the copycat effect, and us talking about it all that so long ago. How, like back then, you were warning, like, look, this is a contagion, and we need to contain this. These acts of violence and things, and it really. Back then, it was possible in a sense to somewhat harness this. And now in the age of social media, it's like it has exacerbated the copycat phenomena, exponentially.
Yeah, it's really changed. Back then, in 1986, when I wrote Suicide Clusters, nobody believed me. Everybody was skeptical. They said there is no clusters of suicides. And what we have seen is the clustering of suicides evolved into school shootings, evolved into mass shootings, and into terrorism and all kinds of different ramifications. And you're right. Back in the day, back in the 80s, we could have contained it. The media could have, without going into censorship, they could have given better advice on not talking about the victims the way that they did back then, or not to glamorize the suspect or the perpetrator or whatever they want to call him.
Yeah.
And so now, it was all over the news today. It's FBI warns of copycat crime.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of like the Bigfoot of crime. It's right out there. Everybody uses the word, and all of the bad actors, so to speak, use it. We know that there's going to be. I've kind of put out the prediction somewhat. There's so many Trump buildings. There's so many Trump hotels or casinos or whatever. You're going to get a copycat crime in which somebody takes a Tesla and blows it up in front of a hotel.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the next 4 years. You've got the blueprint here for more crime. Right. And we already know, I've already written quite a bit in my Twilight Language blog about the rammings. The car rammings have been going on for years.
Right.
At Christmas places or at parades and different places like that, as well as the shootings in the Joker showings of movies and stuff. So it just is over and over and over again. Nobody can deny that it's not a reality. It's a real phenomena, and it's very dangerous.
Right. Well, I know one copycat they don't want to. They're doing a very thorough job of trying to downplay is the guy that shot the healthcare CEO. They don't. They're very uneasy about that, and I can understand why.
Also another one that they're really trying to. If you notice, there really has not been any copycats of a mass violent situation in a sporting event.
Yeah.
And that will really rock America if that starts happening. And, let's hope it doesn't.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's like,
especially
evil.
Baseball games.
What's that? That's definitely not a baseball game. Well, it's mostly old farts like us who are going to be there anyway. So, oh man! Now, what's the count on the books to date now? Where are you at now? A total number of books, even and once you've consulted on or put in your done an intro or all that.
106.
106. Wow.
Because I was asked to count them up one time, so I did every book that I've done a chapter or a foreword or a preface, as well as a co-author, as authored.
Yeah.
So I've got about 40 books that I've authored and co-authored, in different editions where they're really changed. And then there's all of the other ones that I've contributed to or have chapters in. And so 106 it's really low. That's a low number because obviously there's lots of people out there that, just crank them out. I do things like crank museums out.
I don't know who 106 is low for, but that's pretty amazing.
I have been thinking about getting on more radio shows, so I was glad to talk to you about this one because I have been sort of pulling back to do some of these closer to the ground museum stuff. So this was good to do.
This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it, and you're just such a wealth of information and insight. You really kind of challenged me to bring the good stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you're always fun, Tim. You're one of my favorite people.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're one of my favorite people too. Now, as we wrap up,
and your mother's great.
Oh, thank you. Well, there's a picture of me and my mom in the museum. So
yes.
I have a place there in the museum beyond the beer can. So I'm sure I've asked you this before as we close out the interviews, but it's always worth sort of revisiting. Do you have, I say you're a legend, you're an icon. What advice do you have for the next generation of people who are getting into this and who are going to carry the torch forward, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, as we go on, if we make it.
Right.
But what's your advice for the next generation?
Well, I have always tried to be nice to everyone. I know that's laughable nowadays because it seems like caustic personalities get a lot of publicity and get a lot of media followers. I have not really thought about doing that. And there was part of Stan that I really appreciated. He was my model for respect. And one thing I really did to commemorate him was for several months after he died, I would only go to conferences with a tie on and
oh wow,
and dress up because he had a way of presenting like he was giving a PhD doctoral dissertation all the time, and it made me feel like what I try to do is I try to answer every question from all of my attendees and respect all opinions, pro and con, of whether they're a skeptic or a true believer. And I think that's really the only way to do justice to the field. Cryptozoology, to me, is full of passion and full of love. And I really try to share that with the people that come to listen to me or come to the museum or want to be a staff member even. But there's something about that we have to really respect people's thoughts and people's and the other thing I always suggest for those people that want to continue on in this is keep getting educated, keep asking the questions, keep trying to get the answers. And those little kids that come up to me, I say, stay in school.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I was, I often think about when I mentioned it earlier, when I came to the museum, when you first opened it, this was like maybe a week or two after it had opened. It was after the Watertown event, actually. And I hung out there for like an hour and a half and just chatted with you. And It meant a lot, man. It really did. It really did. You never treat me like some kid. You always kind of like lifted me up, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, well, you're one of the special people. And I mean, I didn't know you were so young, but
Getting older every year.
Age difference doesn't mean any difference. I mean, you're one of the things that I've always met up with really intellectual people when I move from city to city. But sometimes I miss moving further away from Cambridge, because it is almost as if it's harder and harder to find people in the cities that you live who are interested in sparring intellectually and debating, looking at different, because sometimes up here in Maine, what's so important is staying alive.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Yeah, no kidding, especially this time of year. Well, I had a blast chatting with you, Loren. I really did. You mean the world to me. And this has been a great conversation. And so folks can, cryptozoologymuseum.com is the website. There it is. And go there, check it out. If you're in the Portland area, it's going to be open at least how long through 2025?
All the way to the end. And it's open.
Okay.
It's open every day, 10 o'clock to 6. We never close. There's different books there. There's different products. We're even selling a copy of the museum, a little pewter copy of the museum in Bangor in the museum down in Portland right now.
Nice. And I've said this to you before when we were on the show, and it's like I often hear from people from the area, kind of around the area, people down in Maryland or Pennsylvania, New York. They're always kind of like, I always wanted to get out there. I always want to get out to Loren's Museum. Stop procrastinating. Do it. Make the trip. It's worth it. It's worth a pilgrimage. It really is. It's an amazing
we've even
place.
had people make it the destination stop for their wedding. So
wow, there
they
you go.
could do that too.
Do it right in front. Right in front of the big statue out front. That'd be great.
Right.
Oh,
Well, Tim,
all right.
you have a
Thank you
great
so much,
new
Loren.
year. Yeah.
You too.
All right. Take care.